SB 9 was signed by Gavin Newsom into law. What is it? What does it mean for you? That and more on this episode.
You're listening to The Andres Segovia Show.
Greetings everyone and welcome to The Andres Segovia Show. I am your host, Andres Segovia, broker servicing Los Angeles and Orange County, California. And for those of you that are newer listeners, you're probably not aware that I'm also involved in the construction industry. In fact, I was involved in the construction industry long before I got involved into real estate professionally. I did do buy, sell, and trade as an individual too. So I bring that perspective to what I do for a living and here on this program whenever I discuss financial matters and anything policy-wise that will come down the pipeline that will affect any of that. And obviously when there's moratoriums issued for XYZ reasons. So in California, as of September 16, Governor Newsom signed SB 9. SB 9 basically eliminates single-family zoning. What that means is there will not be allowed to make new construction of new single-family homes as of January 2022. Now, as for the existing property that's already on single-family zones, they're allowed now to be able to amplify their property, or if they got enough space, to build more on it. And for a lot of property owners that have wanted to make use of that land in that sense, like if they wanted to build residential income property on their own single family home, they were not allowed to do it because it was zoned to be single family only. There's multiple different zonings for residential. They're usually labeled like this: R1, R2, R3, R4. Basically, the unit number: 2 units, 3 units, 4 units. 4 units is the cap when it comes to anything residential. Anything above that is considered commercial. That means that dictates what and how you can use that land. So the zoning was really done as a way to help cities manage the general master plan and how they handle the infrastructure and planned infrastructure, especially when it comes to population growth and this and that. I want to just touch on some of the points of SB 9 and what it can mean for business and property owners in general. So SB 9 basically doesn't allow the construction of single family homes starting in the new year. That means if something's going to be built, it's going to have to be 2, 3, or 4 units on that parcel if they're going to be considered residential. Now, for a lot of investors, that's music to their ears. As for some property owners, they will enjoy the ability to be able to make more use of their property and build equity into that. And by virtue of that, creating wealth to pass on to the next generation, which may or may not be hampered by Proposition 19. Okay, that's something I've covered before, which I recommend you check out. So if you are a new listener that's come across my program or are a semi-regular listener, but you missed out on some of the other programming, I want to take a moment to please invite you to check out my website at www.theandressegovia.com. Wherever I talk about anything with relations to the show, whether it's video platform or audio only, it comes to the website. And if you do follow me on YouTube, there's exclusive content that would appear there, but it always appears on the website. For those of you who subscribe only to the podcast, you don't get the full show. That's just the nature of things and the way things are managed on the back end with the RSS feeds. But I recommend you check out my website, www.theandressegovia.com. As for real estate resources, that's my other website, www.segoviares.com. And these two websites link to one another too. So if you go to one, you can find your way to the other. I recommend you go check it out. And of course, if you like what you hear, hit a like on that like button wherever you're listening. Make sure you're subscribed. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any updates that are ongoing, because I'm going to be covering a lot more news of things that are going on that are going to affect you as either an investor, tenant, property owner. In other words, everybody. So why all of a sudden are we allowed to use our single family property to be able to make it a multi-family residence? Well, that has a lot to do with the concerns that we've been going through here in California, particularly the housing affordability and inventory crisis. Some would argue that those two go hand in hand. Others would argue one side or the other of that story, where we have a lack of inventory causing the rise in prices. Then the other case is that, well, the inventory being built does not affect actual real estate pricing, so it doesn't alleviate that. And there's a bunch of other factors that I'm not going to get into on this episode, but that you should be aware of for how these things are occurring, because it is the opinion of yours truly that this will not alleviate the housing affordability crisis. I do not agree that we have an inventory crisis. So the attention has been given more to inventory than it has been to affordability in a sense, but we'll see where the chips land. I'm hoping to be wrong on this, but again, I emphasize that this is my opinion based on fact, but I do not see SB 9 alleviating the affordability aspect of things. On that topic of affordability, though, one thing that we expect to see in the business world is that now with property, even though it's a single family residence and there'll be a second or third, fourth unit, that we should be able to see more favorable lending in a sense to that property, whether it's a refi or even a purchase of a particular duplex that's in a single family residence, where before it's like it's not legal because you have two units when it's only allowed to be one unit. No concerns there on the lending side, because it will be legitimate, or at least it's intended to be legitimate, because the state and local agencies should recognize it as official occupancy, and if done right, there should be a certificate of occupancy issued to that effect to confirm that this other unit is a legal habitable unit, because we didn't get that with the accessory dwelling unit law. That accessory dwelling unit law was passed several years ago with the intent of what is being used now as the excuse for eliminating single family zoning, in that we got to address the housing affordability crisis, thereby doing away with any limitations of being able to use certain part of the land. Some of the concerns initially about SB 9, where the original language said that the state said no local agency will be involved. Well, local agencies still have some precedence over the health and safety regulations, and of course the historical preservation of some neighborhoods. So if you are in a historical preservation area and you were concerned that your suburban place was going to become an urban place with its changing dynamics, you shouldn't be concerned about that, because technically a local agency that's trying to preserve the historical aspect and aesthetics of the neighborhood take precedence over whatever the state has said. So at least that's as far as we've heard. We're going to know more come January 2022, and we should know more with respects to how lending will work to that sense, or to that effect. So there's a lot to be extrapolated from this. I know investors that usually would only be on the lookout for any R2, R3, R4 zoned property will now be able to feel better about competing for single family homes and not feel like they're overpaying for a single family home that won't have that much of a return. Whereas now they'll be able to take more advantage of turning over that property if they can, to maximize the value in it by building all this equity to it. Now for homeowners, some of that would also be music to their ears, because we do have multi-generational living happening a lot more, I would say, in my generation, and in doing so, they will be able to take advantage of that somewhere down the road. The one barrier to a lot of that is basically the investment side of things. So that's where I don't know but if it's going to truly help in the affordable sense, because do you know how much an average accessory dwelling unit, if done right, costs? It can cost you up to $300,000 or $400,000. That's almost like building a house, and that was before the endemic, where we have all this inflation and stuck supply chain lines that are happening. And when you take into consideration, if you're going to build something anew and you got to adhere to new building code standards that push up the price and requirements that basically mean you need to use more expensive product and supplies for your building, then that really takes a toll. So I know some people might look at this and take it and go the illegitimate route. Well, they will not use the permitting system to be able to get what they want. So I do see a lot of that continuing to happen. I mean, it still happens now. It's just that if you can get it done legally, might as well do it that way, because the last thing you want is for the city to come in and say, look, you're gonna have to demolish this anyway and build a new if you're gonna want to keep it that way. So you don't want to go down that road. But the point is that there's a big barrier to entry when it comes to financing, which is why it's going to be interesting to see how the lending rules all play out when all is said and done. So I'm looking forward to having on the program one of my lenders to be able to discuss this very thing once these things are more concrete. When the time comes, I'll address it. So wherever you're consuming this content, whether it's the video podcast or the podcast itself, if you want to reach out to me on some of the socials or even on YouTube and add to the comments some questions that you might have if you're Californian and are looking to see how this can benefit you, leave your questions there and I'll try to compile all of them so I can address this with my lender when I sit down with him and discuss with him in the coming weeks or even months as things become more clear. Another thing that SB 9 allows for is lot splitting. I know of properties that have a single family home and a huge yard that sometimes goes unused. And some people have wanted to add on to it to say, hey, look, I have enough space to build the house and still have a backyard, maybe even a pool, but the zoning regulations wouldn't allow me to do that. Well, now SB 9 says you can do that. There's some limitations here and there about what you can or cannot do, but you are able to do that. And hey, look, in some extreme cases, if you do a lot split and the lots are big enough, theoretically, you can put 4 units on each of those parcel of lots. That's why some neighbors that are not entirely all excited about it are concerned that, well, it's going to go from one house to basically like an apartment project. Who knows? It might be. That's technically something that you will be within the realm of possibility to do. And it's something that once the new year comes around and whatever local agencies have established for the general master plan, you'll be able to know if you could do that on your property. That's what I wanted to say about the business aspect of things. And there is another element to all this because I bring different perspectives to what I do here on my show. It's not just business, even though I'm talking business, news, and finance, and occasionally, of course, I talk tech and other things well, it's me in my show. But there is the other part of me, okay? There is not the business side of me, but the person side of me that I am not looking at this solely in the business eyes. In fact, I was a strong opposer to SB 9, and I still am. I'm just being transparent here and telling you, I'm putting my biases aside to tell you what is going to be available for you to take advantage of for the new year. But I also believe it's prudent that you understand a lot of these changes that are happening that sometimes you're not aware of and you find out after the fact. You're not alone in all this. Me too. There's just too many things to try to keep track of, and probably like yours truly, you have a life to live and businesses to operate, whether you're putting in extra overtime or you're running that operation. There's a lot of things, not to mention trying to make time for the family too. So in the next episode, I'll address some of my misgivings about this whole SB 9 thing and go over some of the reasons why I don't think it was prudent to do away with single family zoning, because you might not know entirely why or what excuses were used to get rid of single family zoning. Thank you so much for tuning in to this latest episode of the Andres Segovia Show. Remember to like, share, subscribe to stay in the know, and you will be in the know. And I'll see you on the next episode.